I'm Mehdi Sanaji, and welcome to Your Finance TV's Crypto Revolution, covering all things crypto and digital assets. Adam, how are you, mate? Welcome back.
I'm doing well, Mehdi. Thanks for welcoming me back. Good to be here talking with you today.
Well, there's certainly, I know we say it every week, but there's certainly been a few things happening this week. But I don't want to dive right in. I'd like to urge our subscribers, please click subscribe, like, do whatever things you do. We're around a 5,000 subscriber mark, and we thank you for all your support. So thank you again, and keep doing what you're doing. So, Adam, you are fresh back from speaking at a CBOE event, I believe, on crypto, well, on Bitcoin and ETH, and investing in those. I don't know, am I allowed to call them asset classes, securities? What do we call it? Gary, give us a shout. But I'd love to
Yeah,
hear how
just don't call them securities.
I'd love to hear how the event went. Any surprise questions? Any feedback? What are people thinking? Come on, this all hot off the
It's
press here.
right. So it was the CBOE Risk Management Conference that they have every year. It's a big conference, and my topic was Bitcoin and ETH investment theses. And part of the topic was discussing different investment theses. I talked about Bitcoin as the revolution, macro and micro. Ethereum, I talked about more adoption driving the price plus staking. And the fact that, as I described to them, it's okay to be in both. It is okay for both to succeed. Crypto is not an either or. There's not going to be one winner. There can be multiple winners, and it's best to understand the technology. So that's what I was trying to get across there. We had a packed room. We had lots of great questions, and the interesting part, Mehdi, is most of the questions I get, especially around Bitcoin, because I think more people have actually heard of Bitcoin and think that they understand it a little bit better and have read headlines about it, is most of the questions I get are very much toward the negative. And I don't mean that they are negative people or anything like that, but negative like, hey, I heard Bitcoin can be used to fund criminal activity or terrorism, or what is quantum computing going to do to Bitcoin? Can it bring the network down? Or what about rising energy prices or something? All these questions people are asking to basically say, what could happen? What is the risk? Again, it's the risk management conference, right? What is the risk we're undertaking if we allocate to crypto? But in this case, most of the questions were around Bitcoin. And I thought it was really interesting that so many of the questions I get from them and from others center around the negative,
That
the
is
what
interesting.
if, the what can drive this to zero.
That's definitely really interesting. But see, I think I see that as a positive, Adam. And let me tell you why. Right. So everyone knows the stories about all the people that invest in Bitcoin and all this crypto, and they're all driving around in their Lamborghinis and Ferraris at the moment in the Lambo Club. But you're at a risk conference, right? And you're presenting to, I guess, qualified or institutional level or investors who invest for a living, right? The fact that they're asking these questions means to me, the way I read that they're already ready to pull the trigger in investing on whether it's Bitcoin, ETH, or whatever other crypto asset. And they're just trying to manage their mental risk assessment of the downside concerns. So I see that as someone who's already over the line, wants to invest in it, but just wants to make sure that they go through their checklist of concerns. So I think that's fantastic.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And honestly, Mehdi, before this conversation, I hadn't really looked at it that way. But yes, it seems like it's a whole bunch of people that say, I'm ready and I want to allocate to this. I need a few more questions answered that are big questions that, again, what could take this to zero or near zero? What could be a huge impediment? Because that's really the big risk. It's people who have said, I understand the volatility. I understand all the little risks here and there. And not a single question about regulation, by the way. Not a single question that said, what about regulation? What if the US decides to eradicate crypto or something in the US? Not one of those. Everything was either around technical or again, funding criminal activity or something like that. So I think you're right, Matty. I think that it's a positive spin, basically them checking off the last boxes, going, we have someone in the room who's been studying this for a while. I want to ask him these last questions and see what the response is and see if that fits within my risk profile.
Well, and I'm sure your timing couldn't have been any better. The fact that you've just had this conference and suddenly there's been all this news flow and this movement in Bitcoin. It might be that the people that came out of the conference were so convinced by your arguments that they just went out and bought a ton of Bitcoin because
I'm
that's what the
sure.
price moving.
Yes, I gave such compelling arguments to the quantum computing question that moved the market. I think that's what we're going to go with.
Let's go with that. I ain't conversation done. We're going to own it, and that's it.
Yeah,
But no, Adam, seriously, thank you for sharing your thoughts on and conversation pieces from the CBOE event. It sounds like a good event, and it's actually always. I love getting that type of feedback from what's happening, what's being discussed in these other forums, because it just allows us to see: are we on the same page? Are we thinking similarly? Same concerns I might have. Do they have? So I think that's great, and I think our viewers appreciate that type of feedback as well. So thank you for sharing.
sure.
Obviously, we've had quite a bit of chatter the last few days. Has been pretty much focused around the BlackRock ETF or the ETF spot ETFs and Bitcoin in general. The trigger being the fact that the ticker IBTC appeared for the cash ETF ticker for BlackRock appeared, I believe, on their website, but the DTCC website, who give them their tickers. So after that was done, or that was noticed, I should say, the rumor mill started going, and social media and such started going nuts, and we saw the price of Bitcoin have a nice, quite an aggressive little pop. Then we
Yeah.
saw it removed, and then it came back again. But when it was removed, we saw I think Bitcoin dropped something like $1,000 pretty quickly. But we've been ticking back higher again. All I'm going to say is smoke and fire. Can we go with that?
I think we can. I think part of the buying upon seeing that or someone noticing it. One is a whole lot of people that don't really understand what it means, and I'll be honest, I don't 100% understand what it means to have the ticker symbol listed on DTCC. Does that mean it's coming? Does that mean BlackRock and iShares are just reserving that in case so that no one else jumps in like getting a domain name or something with IBTC and that's the one they wanted, and they just get to reserve it? What that means, I think. So a lot of the movement up again is just more speculation. When is it going to be here? And I want to try to get in and own some before the big run, which honestly, Mehdi, is kind of silly. If you think we're that close, then you should probably own it anyway.
I completely agree. But we're seeing headline after headline. I think this has also been the most overarching headline of the week, or the story of the week, not just a headline. And I think it's got investors, potential investors, all a lot more hyped up, which is it's great. It's nice having a bit of froth and excitement in this whole space, especially as we're seeing a bit of concerns in the broader market. But also tie this into the DC court overruling the SEC's denial of the when the SEC denied the application for Grayscale's ETF, they've been forced to reassess this. So again, bring it Grayscale.
Right, exactly. And part of this, I think we talked about already, Mehdi, is there was the ruling against the SEC. There was time for the SEC to appeal. They made it public that they were not going to appeal. And this is just the kind of final stamp to say, okay, since you didn't appeal, the decision by the judge or the decision by the court is now final. You need to go reevaluate. They were kind of already doing that anyway. So this is just, again, a rubber stamp on that same conversation, that same case.
So it's all listen, it goes back to smoke and fire, right? I think all of these things, one by one, these building blocks, and I do think that what you said earlier, I do think that the way the DTCC does it is that you can reserve your ticker, and I'm sure someone of BlackRock's caliber, they can just go in and make their phone call and say, hey, by the way, we want IBTC. It's not like I can phone up and say, hey, I want BTC made or something, but
Right.
someone with that, being one of the biggest players in the ETF space, I'm sure it's just a part of the process, and they're just being proactive about it. So, not necessarily any underlying meaning to it, any strength in decision making from the SEC, but just checking a box that will either have to be done or not. So,
Right.
activity, we like
Yeah.
it.
And the bigger part of that conversation and the what people noticed earlier this week was BlackRock saying we might start actually seeding the fund this week, or this month, but before the end of the month, which is essentially this week.
See the
Right.
way, BlackRock is what most people are saying
Exactly.
for sure.
Go ahead. Yeah. Start buying it up. Whoever's willing to sell it to you, because you know what? Satoshi's not selling to them. Michael Saylor isn't selling to them. So we'll see who's left standing that's willing to sell their Bitcoin.
Well, and that's the funny thing. Okay, so I guess we can say we're out of our crypto winter, or we're on our way out, however we want to phrase it, right? The statistics were showing that it was the largest number of holders of like one Bitcoin or whatever it is. The wallets hadn't been transacting at the lower levels of where Bitcoin was. So what we've seen is, to recap, I guess, is we've seen people holding their Bitcoin through the hard times down to wherever we got to 14, 15,000, whatever it was. And now we're turning around. We have all this positive news that's coming from left, right, and center. I find it hard for these people who fundamentally shown that they believe in this product and they're happy holders to now start dumping it because there's someone who we know is coming to mark to try and participate. So I think we'll see. This is all in my mind, it's very positive for the potential price action of things like Bitcoin because the hard times have been gone through, and
Right.
it's not
And it's still
necessarily.
here. And that's what's giving people a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of clarity, but a lot of maybe not even full on bullishness, but acceptance, right? It's not going away. If FTX, Luna, Celsius, Voyager, if all that didn't kill it, Gary Gensler, everything, then it's not going away anytime soon. And even more so, it's going to be there's going to be more demand for it, which should, based on the laws of supply and demand, increase the price.
That's it. And also, as an aside, what's nice to kind of see as well, and I'm going to jump back on Grayscale. So Grayscale also is collaborating with FTSE Russell, FTSE being the main product in the UK, but the FTSE Russell to launch the crypto sector index series. So they're going to start tracking different digital assets as well. This is again, acceptance. I like the fact that you're using the word acceptance in this. Do you see this as any like a relevant product, or like how do you see this all panning out? Like the FTSE Russell collaboration with Grayscale.
I think it's interesting. I mean, they're creating different indices because so many people, as you and I well know, don't understand all the different crypto assets. They don't understand what the options. It all gets kind of lumped together as if everything is exactly like Bitcoin, and it's just not. So this is Grayscale, who seemingly knows crypto, and FTSE Russell, who seemingly knows indexing and data and such, going, we're going to put this together and say, here's the index for the true cryptocurrencies, right? The Bitcoins of the world that are stores of value. And here's the index for the kind of application tokens, Uniswap and Aave and such. And here's the index for some others. And obviously they're going to go, at some point sell these that we're going to create, eventually funds based on them, whether they're ETFs or, index funds or something, are going to be created based on these indices that they're creating. But I'll tell you right now, FTSE Russell has been big in the digital asset space. I've been on panels with them. I've talked with them. They've been big in the digital asset world, knowing full well that they're going to use their data capabilities and their indexing capabilities to bring out more indices in the crypto world. And, partnering with Grayscale, who has, GBTC and has these huge these huge number of assets under management in the crypto world is it's a big move, and it's something that we'll likely see, honestly, many used more in the rest of the world before we see it used here in the US for regulatory purposes, regulatory reasons. But I think it's interesting, and I think it's helpful. I think it's very helpful that they're creating those indices, basically taking the crypto assets and putting them in different buckets so that most of the financial advisors, most investors don't have to go through the due diligence, don't it pains me to say, don't have to go through the education that we actually provide to understand the differences. They're just going to go, here are these different indices. I can get, potentially at some point I can look at a basket of DeFi or application tokens, and I'm going to let Grayscale and FTSE Russell figure out which ones fit in that index.
It's all acceptance. I think
Yeah.
that's going to be the word of the day.
Right. And Mehdi, real quick, and I don't think you and I talked about this ahead of time, but if we're sticking with Grayscale, in the past, everything on this episode has been about BlackRock. So today it's all Grayscale. Grayscale, had filed an application for an ETH ETF, a spot ETH ETF, and that was the SEC formally recognized it, which is part of the process to say we're going to start evaluating your application so that their 240 days has started on the ETH spot ETF. And you and I have said before, once there's a Bitcoin spot ETF, and ETH can't be that far behind, because they're, anything that gets all the denials they've had for Bitcoin would be the same for ETH. So it seems like the approval for Bitcoin would be similar to ETH. So I think that's interesting to note, that I think a few others had applied before. Now Grayscale, who already has an ETH trust, like their Bitcoin trust, with I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars in it, but it would likely be converting from that trust into an ETF. But that process has started officially with the SEC.
I think it's got something like 4.3 billion in
Okay.
AUM, so it's a sizable number.
Yeah.
Um, first of all, thank you for that, and I wanted to say, I'm just going to throw out a prediction out here. I don't know why it just came to me while we were talking. I think Gary Genzer is going to be going into Turkey Day, Thanksgiving, and he's going to sit there and just have his list of things to do, and he's just going to be like, you know what? Check, 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 check. Fire out a Bloomberg email, whatever it is, Twitter, tweet, X, whatever it is, and just approve everything. And we'll have
Yep.
a
You
very
think
happy.
that? You think so? Friday, a slow trading day, the day after Thanksgiving, everyone's going to their Black Friday sales, and that's the day that he's going to be like, "Yeah, we're good."
Yeah, I think it's plus or minus Thanksgiving Day. So yeah, maybe Black Friday could be the day to do it. So
That would give a whole new meaning to Black Friday in my world.
there we go. So that's my prediction. It's going to be around that period. So Gary, if you're watching, let's go. Switching to a name that we actually discussed, I think in the last couple of weeks, Deutsche Bank, who's been getting involved in some of these crypto asset conversations. Deutsche Bank, I believe, with SC Ventures, which is I think Standard Chartered Ventures, have completed their first. And we did discuss this. We touched on this, I think, at one point. But they actually completed their first stablecoin swap on Universal Digital Payments Network, UDPN, and which was launched in Davos. So is this a big hoo-ha?
I think this goes along with so many of the other items we've talked about recently, with J.P. Morgan and their tokenized BlackRock fund, with Deutsche and some others instituting some sort of experiments utilizing tokenized funds. This is Deutsche Bank again with Standard Chartered, who, by the way, has been really experimenting, really looking forward in the digital asset ecosystem, experimenting and having their first stablecoin transaction, moving stablecoins back and forth. And it was a USDC versus a Euro stablecoin. And they exchanged them. And these are the kind of experiments we're going to have to see. They're going to see, okay, what happened from a security perspective? What was the settlement like? How fast was the transaction? How much did it cost us? Can we both see it? Are there places along the lines where something could have gone wrong? This is what they're going to have to do, because they make one little transaction like this. Eventually, it's going to be billions of transactions like this, and they're going to have to make sure that they run pretty seamlessly. So I think it's a big deal. And if we go back to my talk with the CBOE, the part of the Ethereum investment thesis is there's going to be more adoption. And the more adoption isn't always just you and me sending stablecoins back and forth. It's the likes of monster banks and financial institutions making exchanges utilizing stablecoins or utilizing tokenized assets, or both, moving them back and forth and being able to settle instantly, being able to witness that transparency, being able to settle for much less in fees than they did before. That's what they're experimenting with. And that goes a long way towards adoption. And that's really what we're looking at. It's not just how many people are going to buy and throw it into an ETF, but how many huge companies like that, huge financial institutions that have trillions and trillions of dollars under management, how many of those institutions are actually going to start utilizing this system on top or instead of the current system that they have? And that's where we see adoption of crypto.
Adoption.
Yeah.
Um, Adam, there was a very good, I don't know if you saw the chain analysis report that came out as well. It's actually really interesting. So they broke down the fact that stablecoin activities, and for we all know why, but stablecoin activity has been shifting away slightly from the US side of things. But North America is the largest crypto market that's being studied, and they estimate that it's something like 1.2 trillion in value received on chain between July last year and June of this year. And that represents a chunky 24.4% of the global transaction activity during that same period. So North America is leading the world in crypto usage, but the stable coin side has been kind of moving away from the US, obviously based on regulatory headaches and such.
Right.
What are your thoughts? Do you see this like break it down into, is this positive, the fact that the US is still obviously very involved? Is this negative, seeing the stablecoin side going away? Like, do you see a balance here? Are you concerned by any of this data that you're seeing come out of the chain analysis report?
I don't think we're concerned, and I don't think it's that shocking to see. I mean, North America has the most because we have the most money. It's at that point it's just a numbers game, and we have the most money, and therefore we have the most crypto adoption. As a percentage basis, the U.S. never shows up in like the top 10, but because we don't need it. But we see a lot of adoption here because we have the most money and people are experimenting. When the likes of monster banks like J.P. Morgan experiment with crypto, it's big. Those are big numbers. You end up with big numbers, and when you have a small proportion of U.S. Investment going towards crypto, it's a big number. So if you just go raw numbers, yeah, that's not surprising. I don't think there's anything that concerns me except stablecoin usage, moving away from the U.S. and North America. But that doesn't surprise me based on regulation here versus regulation elsewhere, and also based on the need elsewhere, right? I mean, we've talked about this. We see wars going on elsewhere in the world. We see places where governments are taking away people's rights, taking away people's money. Banks are just shutting down. And so elsewhere in the world, things like stable coins are really needed, where you see huge inflation numbers. They need stable coins. We kind of don't need them here. We're playing around and experimenting with them, and they can obviously help, the large financial institutions save on fees and more, settlement time and transparency, but it's not heavily needed here. And we're still waiting for some bit of regulation. We still have members of Congress, a lot of members of Congress, that are very against crypto and against stable coins unless it's a central bank digital currency. So I think there's still so much regulatory uncertainty, and that's why you're seeing the usage of stable coins move elsewhere in the world. But North America, and in particular the US, still has a majority or not a majority, more crypto adoption and usage than anywhere else in the world because we just have the most money.
So I guess that's a very simple and straightforward argument, really. More money, more involvement. So
Right.
stay on it. So Adam, before you wrap, I kind of wanted to end with a story that it's not necessarily negative, but we started with talking about spot Bitcoin ETFs, and let's kind of end with a slightly different nuance on the same sort of conversation. But Hong Kong is reversing their stance on spot crypto and ETF investing. Talk us through this. Is this a big negative for the mindset coming from
Yeah.
the SEC?
No, I think it's interesting from the way I read it. And again, not an attorney or anything reading this. The way I read it is Hong Kong saying we're going to be more okay with people with either individuals or families, whoever, who are not institutions, actually buying and trading potentially spot crypto, because in the absence of that, we're going to have people buying ETFs from the likes of the US and Canada and elsewhere in the world. And we feel like that's riskier because we're not able to do our due diligence on those companies and those countries and all those things. And we would rather our people, kind of keep their money here, keep their investment here. And so Hong Kong going, okay, in the instead of having all of our citizens investing their money in the BlackRock ETF, the BlackRock Bitcoin Spot ETF, whose symbol will be IBTC, as we know, and not BTC Med. If we don't want our people investing in that and basically sending their money over to BlackRock, we need to give them access to spot crypto. And so I think that's my understanding of the kind of regulatory shift is they're saying, okay, in the past it was only institutions, and now we're bringing it down the line, and more kind of retail investors, after they pass some sort of exam, are going to be able to purchase spot crypto.
Isn't it funny how something that was created to decentralize finance has now been the next level is obviously re-centralizing it for the use of global ETFs potentially. And now we're looking at deglobalization by different countries to try and bring it back into their own personal economy. So
Yeah.
full circle we go.
Yeah. No one could have seen that coming, I'm sure.
No, no. Adam, mate,
Yeah.
so much. I always enjoy chatting to you, and today I feel like it was a particularly special conversation. I really enjoyed the feedback from your CBOE event, so thank you for sharing all your conversational pieces from there.
Sure. As always, Mehdi, thanks for having me on.
Until next week, everyone watching, thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out Adam's course on Interaxis, digital assets and crypto education. Until next time, thanks again, and good luck investing.